Hello and welcome to the Matt's Movie Reviews podcast. I am your host, Matthew Pejkovic, and this is episode number 648. Available now on digital is The Coddling of the American Mind, a documentary that delves into the mental health crisis that has engulfed Generation Z and the role that colleges and universities plays in setting up a generation for failure. Based on the 2018 best-selling book, The Coddling of the American Mind dives into the rot found in a Western education system that has turned their institutions of learning into an echo chamber where fear and paranoia fester. And for everyone out there, you can go to thecoddlingmovie.com and find all your information about The Coddling of American Mind, including links to where you can watch the film. And I really do highly recommend people do this because it is a fascinating movie. And I'm glad to say that the director of The Coddling of American Mind, Ted Balaker, joins me right now. Ted, how are you?
I'm very well. Thank you so much for having me, Matthew.
Well, I'm so glad to be able to talk to you because we were just talking off air just now, just how much of a fascinating subject this documentary it is, and it really is. And the book itself, released 2018, was a best-selling book on the New York Times bestseller, written by Greg Lukianoff and Jonathan Haidt. Um, this was a book I haven't heard of before, and the thing I love about watching documentaries and movies in general, sometimes they're kind of like really great kind of gateways into other forms of storytelling, whether it be fiction or non-fiction. And I think The Colony on American Mind is a book I really need to get in my library soon because the documentary really does the book justice, I believe, and the subjects in it as well. When did you first time you remember coming across the book, and how did you know that this would be prime topic for a documentary for yourself and your wife and production partner Courtney to dive into?
Yeah, well, we read it shortly after it came out in late 2018. We have been longtime friends of one of the authors, Greg Lukianoff, and have come to be friends with John as well. But so we were always very interested whenever Greg had a big project. And reading through it, you see that it really chronicles the Gen Z mental health crisis, which really is a crisis. I'm usually on the other side, cautioning people against needlessly saying something is a crisis when it's not. But in this case, it really is a crisis. And so there was the big picture worry, and then there was the very little picture worry for us because Courtney and I have a 10-year-old son. He's in Gen Alpha. We only recently learned that that's what his generation is called. And
Mm.
so there was this great urgency to do our small part to help turn things around for Gen Z. And they're the generation that's most directly affected by all this, but also for future generations, including our son's generation. So that's when it really clicked for us.
Well, I'm in the same boat as you. I have a 10-year-old son.
Oh,
And
wow.
I have a soon to be 13-year-old son who's just in high school, and he's autistic. So the story of Lucy in the movie was a very key interest to me in regards to his my son and him having being autistic and such. Um, the thing that the film does is, which I think is really clever on your part, is that not only do you kind of go into the making of the book itself, you talk to Greg and Jonathan, but you talk to students who have went through their own experiences dealing with this type of stuff that the movie's talking about. Now, universities, there's so many of them in America, so many students as well. I'm curious, how do you find the students that you need to participate in the documentary? Do you put out an open call? Was there any other methods of trying to find these interview heads? And what was their reaction when you kind of get in touch with them and say, hey, I'm making a documentary based on this book, which no doubt a lot of them probably would have read, considering this is a book made for them about issues that they're facing.
Yeah, finding the subjects was so important, and we're very happy that the audience members just really connect with them. They're, as you saw, they're just great young people. And finding them was very difficult. And unfortunately, there was no kind of path that we could just take or kind of open call. We weren't quite sure. It was one of those things where we sort of know what we're looking for, but not quite. So it was sort of hard to put out any kind of typical casting call or something like that. So it involved a lot of just a lot of hard work, lots of phone calls, lots of research, And it is one of those things you kind of don't know, like I said, you're not quite sure what you're looking for, but you definitely know when you found it. And when you come across someone like Saeed or Kimmy or Ariane or Lucy or Anna, you know that you want to ask them to be in your movie. And in some cases, the young people who became our subjects had already read The Coddling of the American Mind book, and in other cases, they did not. And in Kimmy's case was interesting. She's an African immigrant, and although she didn't read the book, she like it was brilliant and almost bizarre how she followed a lot of the suggestions of the book without having read it. She just sort of knew how to do it on her own. I think a lot of it was from her background uh, as a Christian and what it taught about forgiveness to her. So in some cases they were always all of them were very interested in the project. In some cases, such as like Ariane, he really had to think long and hard about he wanted to do it, I should say, but he was very frightened about the repercussions of going on the record
Hmm.
with telling his story. He had already been through the ringer in terms of being canceled on his campus, being isolated as an immigrant from India himself. So he was really put through the ringer, and he's a very brave kid. But, like any of us, when you're standing at the edge of the cliff, you're saying, do I really want to jump off? And we're happy that he eventually said yes.
What's really interesting in the choice of students in the film, there's an outsider perspective. So we have students who come from different countries. You spoke before about Kimmy, and then you have also other people as well from India, Uganda. When it comes to Lucy, she's an American citizen, but just from what she says in the movie, she just came from a mental institution right into Stanford University, I think it was. So there's another kind of outsider perspective in a certain sense as well, especially her being autistic. Not to say that autistic people are outsiders, but I find with my son, sometimes he finds himself on the outside looking in a lot of kind of like situations of normal childhood and teenage and just based on how comfortable he is in different situations. How important was it to try to get a different outsider perspective on what the Western education system is like for these people, as opposed to having, say, a student who was raised in, high schools and such in America and then went into a university? I mean, did you find that American-born students were more open and perceptive to the IDs being foisted upon them in college, as opposed to, say, someone who came from Uganda who viewed or had a perception of what Western universities were like based on, say, a movie or, a TV show?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. So we have a mix of American-born and foreign-born students. And to your question, I should say we came to really appreciate the importance of an outsider perspective. It wasn't something that we, from the get-go, decided that we wanted to mix in some international students as well. Just through kind of serendipity, we came across our international students. And then when my wife and producing partner, Courtney, discussed it, we really liked it. It just became so apparent that the outsider perspective was so important. It is important for so many ways. The movie, I should say, is very funny. A lot of people find it very funny, even though it's about some heavy issues. And
Mm.
that's thanks to these subjects. And a lot of the comedy comes from the fish out of water dynamic. And you can really and on top of that, it kind of diffuses a lot of the tension that comes with these issues. We're talking about race and sex and gender and censorship and microaggressions and all these topics that are very, very fraught and highly politicized. But if you take someone like Saeed, who comes to campus in the fall of 2016, has never even heard of Donald Trump, doesn't know what left wing means or right wing, and he's forced to make these very consequential decisions about which team are you going to be on? Are you going to be on the right side of history or the wrong side of history, and become a pariah? Regardless of whether what of your political leanings, you just have to sympathize with someone like Saeed in that situation, because what is he? You could imagine yourself in that situation. Well, I would think, what would I do? That would be terrifying to be in that situation. Um, so there's the comedic aspect, there's the kind of um, uh, diffusing the tension aspect. And then it also helps open minds, I think, because you know that someone like Saeed or someone like Kimmy, they're not like on team red or team blue. The discussion is so polarized these days. So I think people are more apt to just kind of listen to them, listen to their ideas, listen to their experiences without saying, oh, well, of course he would say that because he's a blah, 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 or she's a blah, blah, blah. So I think and I hope that it allows for the viewers to be a little bit more open-minded when they encounter the the thoughts from these very compelling outsiders.
The Matt's Movie Reviews YouTube channel is brought to you by TeePublic. TeePublic is the world's largest marketplace for independent creators to sell their work on the highest quality merchandise. With over 1.2 million designs, TeePublic is sure to have something you'll love. When documentaries dive into these type of subjects or based on some type of academia or a book like this, they can be quite dry at times. I was saying to you off air about, and I've written down in my notes, I wrote down this film pops, and when I mean pop, it's like there's an energy to it. And I think what's really great about that is the editing that you bring to it. And it can be a tricky thing. You got all these different kind of resources at your disposal, interview heads, you got animations. I love the 2D animations in this movie. I think they're really effective. The great score as well. And I'm a big fan of that as well. When you come into the editing room and you piece this thing together, what is kind of like your philosophy on tackling a subject like this? I mean, there's so many different ways you can go from it, but it seems to me that even though there is, we're dealing with very serious topics here and such, there's almost kind of like a playful undercurrent throughout the whole thing. The animations, the editing, the music, it all kind of, there's a really good, great contradiction in the two things that kind of create kind of like a unique whole.
Well, thank you, Matthew. I really appreciate that. That's what we aim for. So it's so gratifying when someone recognizes it like that. To your question, um, I should back up and say my wife comes from primarily a narrative film background, and I come from more documentary and then network news before that. So I think there's a lot of cross-pollination, and I think working with and around and on narrative film sets and just kind of being steeped in that culture a lot too, it was I really came to appreciate just it sounds so simple, but the importance of story. And I think we have a lot of friends in the industry, and some of them, one in particular, I remember he doesn't call documentaries documentaries. He's like they're comedies, they're dramas, and you need to think of it like that. And so I think sometimes documentary filmmakers think that just putting up important information is enough, but we think that although that's important, it's even more important to tell a compelling and entertaining story. The motto of our production company is making important ideas entertaining. So if you have important ideas and they're not entertaining, you've really done a disservice to those ideas because no one's going to pay attention to them. And the best way to make an entertaining movie is just to pay really close attention to the fundamentals of storytelling. Do you have good characters? Are they trying to overcome challenges? Is there dramatic tension? And so we came at it from a very story-based perspective that these aren't just going to be disembodied people kind of spouting out disconnected ideas. There's going to be a beginning, a middle, and an end. And you're going to be rooting for, and two of our characters, Kimmy and Lucy, have the most dramatic arc. So we begin and end with them. And so the viewers will see where these two young women begin, and they'll see the trouble and the mental turmoil they encountered, and they'll be rooting for them to come out the other side and to find happiness and to find peace. And we're very gratified that's been the experience of viewers, and we're especially gratified by the response from Gen Zers and their parents. We have a lot of heartwarming responses from Gen Z viewers. One young woman even wrote a whole essay about how the movie helped her. Another young man in Arizona State wrote his essay for an English class about the movie, and he got an A. um, and we're going to include some excerpts from his essay on our website. So we have lots of stories like that where it's just so gratifying to connect with these young people who are going through just a very difficult time. And through the example of our interview subjects, they can find the way toward happiness in their own lives.
When I watch films like this, I tend to write down some silly observations where I try to frame what I call silly questions. Might be silly to me, might not be to you, but I'm going to ask them anyway because I'm just curious. Um, okay, when it comes to Kimmy and Lucy in particular, they both have religious backgrounds, one Christian, one Jewish. There's a moment in the film where I think Lucy was talking about she went to think it was a protest against the shooting for George Floyd, and which meant she had to miss out on Shabbat,
Right.
which she said, "Oh, it was worth it," and which is at the time she mused that was where her head was at. It's kind of a theory of mine is that post 9/11, after kind of like the militant atheism of say Christopher Hitchens, Richard Dawkins, and secular culture becomes even more prevalent, and religious observance and religious life kind of goes down with the younger generation. There was kind of like a gap there, and that gap is filled with different things. One thing I observe on as a film critic and such, pop culture kind of taking a gap. People, I don't know if this happens in America, but in Australia, in our census, we had a record number of people put down Jedi as their religious observance, which I think says a lot about
Right.
about that question and some people who approach it. On the other end, their politics and activism seems to have filled that void as well. They seem to have looked at political figures as almost kind of like godly like well and their stances as something that's you know as if Moses was given something from Mount Sinai or such. Do you think the the vacuum of religious observance and it was something that was primed for something like the kind of activism driven political driven kind of stuff happening to kids now? Is that something that was primed for those conditions to really fester and bloom?
Yeah, I really think so. I think that's a very smart observation that you have, and I think there's a lot to it. It is um, kind of a substitute religion for a lot of people. Um, Sometimes I say everybody's religious, but not everybody believes in God,
Mm.
and I think that's really the case. We all have a yearning for something to connect with something bigger than ourselves. Some people smother it over time. But I think, and my wife and I are Christians, and so you can kind of guess where we land on this. But I think it's kind of troubling then, on the other hand, to see people try to cobble together kind of a phony religion, and to put um, so much trust and faith in that. And the way you point to Lucy, for instance, I mean, that's a very good for instance, because it was certainly for her, and frankly for Kimmy as well, the Christian. It was fulfilling this role of importance and transcendence and connecting with something greater than yourself, and community. All these things that people traditionally look through with traditional religions. Yeah, now you get people saying that they're Jedis in places like Iceland. I read some statistic that like more than 50% of the population believes in trolls, and they like
Mm.
really do, and to the point where they have to like before building bridges or something, they have to check for trolls. I don't remember all the details, but I remember some cognitive scientists on a podcast explaining like, no, this is serious. Like they really believe that. And so I think that this kind of culture of wokeism and social justice activism gave a lot of well-meaning people, and it's very easy to caricature them. We didn't want to just shake our fist at the so-called social justice warrior, and we also didn't want to enable them. We see the left and the right making mistakes in different ways. One side just mocks them, the other side enables them. We wanted to understand them because any one of us could have been Kimmy or Lucy I could have if I grew up with social media the way they did, and I had to endure the confluence of environmental factors and whatnot that they had to endure. Uh, just I'm just lucky that I didn't have to go through that particular collection of bad things the way they did.
The Matt's Movie Reviews podcast is brought to you by Amazon Prime Video. One of the best on-demand streaming services available, Amazon Prime Video features exclusive Amazon originals as well as popular movies and TV shows. Watch Amazon Prime Video anytime, anywhere. Final question here. When I watch this as a parent, I think to myself, what do we as parents, what role do we play in perhaps contributed to some of this stuff, or maybe what role we can play in trying to counter this stuff through our, the upbringing of our own children. And as I've said, I got a son's autistic, and I got another son as well. And I try my very best, especially with my Michael, my son who has autism. I try my very best to make sure that he is being raised to be as independent as he can. But at the same time, I know there are limitations with just his executive function skills and other things as well. And I don't want to coddle him. I don't want to be the coddling type, it's not, I know it's not good for me, but at the same time, I think parents, especially, I don't know, here in Australia, we had a royal commission into abuses in institutions, and it was kind of ripe through like religious, secular, what have you. And I think a lot of parents kind of can't help but have in the back of their mind that everyone's going to get their kid and such, and you can't help but be that kind of helicopter parent or coddling parent. As yourself as a parent as well, who's, reading up on these things and diving into it, and now made a documentary about it. Where do you think the fine line is between trying not to be a coddling parent, but at least trying to be a, I don't know, what's the word I'm looking for? Protective parent, without kind of overstepping that mark to where we make it where we bring in a child into a world with the wrong attitudes, wrong perceptions, and wrong philosophies as to what the world is and how we should treat them and how they should conduct themselves in the world.
Yeah, it's an ongoing, it's just a very tricky situation. A lot of life is trying to find that Goldilocks zone, the just right zone.
Mm,
So much of life is a tension uh, between opposites, and you can make a mistake going too far in one direction or too far in the other direction. And in years past, maybe we went too far in the direction of letting kids do too much. In our movie, Greg Lukianoff said that he was probably too free range, his upbringing was, and you can have things like neglect, and that's terrible too. But we've certainly overdone it in the other direction in recent decades. And I think the thing to know is that there is no, I think, fine line. So it's a series of making a bunch of little mistakes and then reacting to that in a way that's more sensible than what you did the last time. So accepting that you're going to make a lot of mistakes, but try not to make the same mistakes over and over, and try not to make really big mistakes. I think in general, kids can do more than we think they can.
mm,
So I'd say err on the side of letting them do a bit more than you think they can do. There are certain things that will just kind of naturally. I think a lot of it is there's very good and reassuring advice in this movie too. It's that it's sometimes it's in our quest to quote unquote do something is when we're doing the most harm. And a lot of times what kids really need is for us not to do something, or to do a lot less. So they just need to hang around with other kids, mix it up. If they skin their knee, don't mommy and daddy don't run over and fix it for them. If they get in a little shoving match with another little kid, don't fix it for them. Let them do it themselves. Yes, it's going to lead to more scraped knees and tears in the short run, but it's very easy to comfort ourselves with these short run um, um, outcomes where we avoid the tears, where we avoid the skinned knees. But what we don't realize as parents is that what we're giving up and what's coming in the future is a child who potentially can't deal with the real world. And the more that we coddle our kids, the more that we overprotect them, the less we're preparing them for life on their own as independent people. So I think we kind of have to grin and bear it. Most of us, I'm Gen X and older. We all love to talk about how free range our childhoods were, and yet, and I'm, my wife and I joke we do it too. We made this movie about it, and we're still pulled toward. We still have this voice inside of us just screaming like protect, and even we have to fight against that. And we've been steeped in this stuff for years. So I think it helps to think back to the childhoods that we had, that we turned out all right, even though we walked home by ourselves. We had jobs when we were 15. All those things, when you look back and you tell stories about your life with friends, you're not telling the easy things. You're telling the time when you fell off the jungle gym, or you got humiliated at karate, and then you came back and learned how to deal with it. So those, I mean, that's the important stuff of life, and we have to realize that we're really depriving our children of the richness of life if we swoop in to fix every little problem that they have when they're kids, because that's just setting them up for bigger failure in the future.
Well, it's a part of just a fascinating whole. And for everyone out there, the coddling of the American mind, available now on digital. Go to thecoddlingmovie.com. I'll have the link as well in the show notes. And if you can't get to the link, Prime Video, Apple TV, Google Play, Substack. From what I understand, this is the first kind of feature film that premiered on Substack, so people can check it out on that subscription service as well, which I think is just fascinating. So it's great to see different methods and innovations in regards to distribution independent films, because I think it's really important that people really explore different avenues to get films like this out there. And yeah, Ted Balaker, thank you very much for your time today. Congratulations with the film. I think yourself and Courtney have done a real service to the book, and also just a real service to the generation that's being portrayed in this movie. I think you did a great job here, and I thank you very much for your movie and for your time today.
Well, thank you so much, Matthew. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for watching the Matt's Movie Reviews channel. Please subscribe for more reviews, podcast interviews, and exclusive content.